Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Bryan, and I'm a member of the family's SCN2A team for accelerating science and clinical outcomes and the principal investigator of the Dragonfly Registry. The Dragonfly Registry is a natural history study of individuals impacted by SCN2A variants. In the summer of 2024, the Foundation launched this registry on a platform hosted by the National Organization of Rare Disorders and their I Am Rare platform. We have several goals in mind with the launch of this registry. And first, we want to understand how individuals with pathogenic SCN2A variants change over time. So we built the registry to be longitudinal, meaning we want families to come back in at regular intervals and update the answers to their surveys. This way, we can see how the condition progresses over time. We also want to identify any areas or treatment or intervention that could be useful and show improvement. For instance, what anti-seizure medications are most effective? Are there any effective treatments for GI conditions that our community may face? And finally, we want to help develop new treatments for individuals with SCN2A variants. Seizure frequency is the most common endpoint used for therapeutics targeting SCN2A, but as you'll see from our data today, the majority of patients with SCN2A variants don't have seizures. Thus, we need more clinical endpoints to show efficacy of novel therapeutics that are going through clinical trials. We encourage parents and/or caregivers of patients with SCN2A variants to visit the survey using the link shown at the bottom left of the screen. That link will take you to the Dragonfly landing page seen here. You would simply click register in the top right corner, and then you'll be asked to provide your contact information, complete the study consent, and then begin answering the survey questions. This screen shows the Dragonfly survey page, and you can see the list of survey blocks in the middle of the screen. As you can see in the example here, 2 of the survey blocks shown completed in green, and the others read draft in red, meaning that these are still needing to be completed. You can click the Take Survey button to begin each block of questions. You can also click View Responses to view your previous responses. You may also see the Reports button. This is a really useful feature, and after you've answered the survey questions, you can click the button to view the de-identified aggregated data from all the respondents, so you can see where your answers land on the spectrum of SCN2A clinical phenotypes. I'll briefly run through what the process of registering, consenting, and completing the questions will look like. And one of the first tasks that you'll do is to complete the consent for the study. The consent takes a few minutes to read, but essentially it describes the study, details of what your involvement in the study is, and provides contact information that you can have if you have any questions. It also lets you know that you can withdraw from the study at any time if you so choose to. Once you complete the consent, you will then begin answering the survey questions. It'll take about an hour or so to complete the survey. We understand that sometimes this is tough to do in a single sitting, so we broke the questions up into blocks, and you can always save your progress and return to where you're left off at another time that's more convenient to you. On the screen is an example of a question from our motor milestone survey, which asks questions on fine and gross motor skills from very simple movements all the way up to running and jumping. To answer this question, you'd simply click the buttons that correspond to where your child is for each motor skill evaluated. Once you complete the entire survey, you're eligible to receive a $50 gift card for your time and effort in completing the survey. This is our thank you for taking the time to increase our understanding of SCN2A related disorders. The Dragonfly study has been up and running for a little over half a year now, and there are over 150 participants in the study. This is an incredible number of families that took the time to increase our understanding of this condition. And this creates an enormous and very exciting amount of data that has never been captured or reported on SCN2A. And for the remainder of this presentation, I want to show you just a small snippet of the data that I think might be of interest to you. There's so much data on the clinical progression, on medication use for seizures, GI issues, motor conditions, and on correlating the genetic variant to different clinical phenotypes. There's a lot of work to be done. It takes some time to analyze the data, and our goal is to make the de-identified data freely available to researchers and to publish the analysis of the data starting this year. Here you can see the distribution of participants by country. Participants overwhelmingly reside in the US, with a number of other countries represented. So if you know of families or groups in other countries, please spread the word about the Dragonfly study so we can boost our international participant numbers. Of the approximately 150 participants currently in the registry, a slight majority are male and overwhelmingly white. Diagnosis often occurs early from 0 to 12 months, but there are a large number of respondents that are diagnosed much later, some at over 18 years of age. This is likely due to more recent use of genetic testing. The median age of diagnosis is probably the better statistical tool to use for this group, which comes to about 2 years of age for genetic testing and confirmation of an SCN2A variant. There's a large number of variants that are reported throughout the genetic reports that are uploaded. Here's just a subset of them, but there are many more. We'll be working with researchers and clinicians to annotate these variants into gain of function, loss of function, and variable function in the very near future. And we hypothesize that we can stratify treatment and intervention effectiveness as well as clinical phenotype based on variant type. For the data shown in the remainder of this presentation, we're grouping these variants all together. So you'll see the average reported for all the variants. We also collect some information on the parents, and we find that the majority of respondents are college graduates. Most have 3 to 5 members in their household, and overwhelmingly, the majority are married. The average age of the parent at the time of the child's birth is a little older than the national average by about 10 years. And there are a variety of clinical challenges faced by this group of individuals with SCN2A variants, most notably communication and learning disorders, with less than half actually reporting seizures, motor skills, emotional challenges, and autism. In this we are included, pharma companies that are developing treatments for SCN2A related disorders have a tendency to focus on seizure control as a gold standard for treatment for the SCN2A community. But as you can see from this data, there are a lot of other areas that we've identified that, if improved, might make a significant impact to the community. We collect a fairly extensive medical history on the respondents. Almost all the individuals with SCN2A variants experienced neurological and muscular issues, and there were a lot of neonatal and labor delivery complications in this group. There are also many other clinical complications that are reported. Of those minority of individuals with seizures, the frequency of seizures is fairly spread out, having them daily, weekly, or monthly. And again, most of the respondents reported actually not having seizures. We collect information on medications for seizures, GI issues, mobility, and many others. Here's the data on medication used for seizures. And we can see that there are some leading medications prescribed and a large number of medications that are being used in this group. One of my favorite parts of the study is that parents and caregivers can report on where they believe certain medications worked or where they didn't work. Here we show the parent-caregiver reported efficacy on various anti-seizure medications, showing that some medications showed seizure control better than others. I look forward to stratifying this group again based on gain, loss, or mixed function, and see how separating the genotypes into different buckets might show us who will benefit from certain drugs. We ask a lot of questions on milestones for communication, motor skills, cognition, and social skills. This might take a bit of time for you to complete when you're filling out the survey, but the data is so important for our understanding of how SCN2 variants show clinical progression. There is a massive amount of information presented on the screen, so I don't expect you to see each data point unless you have a really strong magnifying glass. But what I want to show you is that our survey accurately captures the spectrum of capabilities that our community displays, with almost all participants falling somewhere in between the most basic milestone that we assess and the most complicated milestone that we're surveying. So this means that our survey is very relevant to the community's developmental milestones. There's so much more data I can't wait to analyze and share. And this is data that helps inform drug development, clinical guidelines, and the understanding of the condition that's necessary for progress to be made. We're off to a great start. We need more participants, especially in non-US countries. Also, we want participants to repeat an abbreviated form of the survey every 6 months so we can see how things change over time. If you participated in the Dragonfly studies, thank you so much. And please go back into the portal at 6 months to analyze the follow-up questions. If you haven't participated in the Dragonfly study, please take the time to do so. Here's the link one more time. Your participation brings us a step closer to a full understanding of SCN2A related disorders and one step closer to better clinical guidelines. And what is most important to all of us, a better treatment or a cure. Thank you again for taking the time to learn about the Dragonfly study by the Families SCN2A Foundation. All the best. Good day.
That was great, Brad. Thank you so much for explaining all aspects of the study. And I agree. Thank you to everyone that's participated so far. I do have a couple questions if you have some time for that.
Absolutely.
You said on one of your slides that we can view our own data in the whole aggregate database, like how our personal loved ones' data lines up with the others. Can you show me how to do that?
Absolutely. Let me go back a few slides and so if you look on this slide, in towards the middle of the slide and slightly to the right, you'll see view responses. If you've
Yeah.
completed a survey and you've answered all the questions, then that box opens up for you. If you click on view responses, then it'll actually show you like a de-identified. You can't see everybody's individual data, but it's aggregated in different graphs or charts. They're shown in different ways. But basically, you can see the whole community's response to that. So, number of seizures, whether it's weekly, daily, monthly, and you can compare basically where you are in that, just as an example.
That's great. I didn't even know that. So thank you for explaining that. I'm excited to go in there and view my responses since I finished taking all of my surveys.
Yeah,
Um,
I know what I'll be doing today.
I know. Amanda, do you have any questions or should I just keep going with my list here?
I do have a question. So at the end, Brad, you said that uh, every 6 months to go in to update. Will participants get an email to remind them to do that, or do they need to just do that on their own?
Well, we send them an email at 6 months, and they would go in and do that. It's an abbreviated list of questions, so you don't have to repeat the entire survey over and over again. But what we really want to see is, how things have changed over 6 months. And in a perfect situation, we can follow somebody for a long time, and we can see how this developmental milestones changed. Which medications worked good or did not work. For certain conditions or certain phenotypes, and we really just want to follow that longitudinally over time.
Okay. And then another question I have, Brad, is, now that I'm just starting to get into the study, when I'm answering a question that, say my child, you know, did, has only just started doing a task or something, or maybe did it once that I've seen, how would you answer that?
Um,
So, so like, say we might be in the motor development or the communication. I know there was one slide I feel like that it said um, can do this or did this has done this previously,
yeah,
right? Um, so sometimes I think about like cannot do this, can do this with assistance, can do this on their own. And sometimes it stumps me because I think, well, I've seen it a few times, but he doesn't do it all the time. Would you just say cannot do this if my child is not doing it regularly?
I think you have to think, if you're helping them, then I would definitely put that can do that with assistance. If you see them do it, I would say more than once or so, then there's some consistency there. They can do that on their own, and I think that's part of the reason why we're doing this longitudinally, because you might see, some milestones begin to emerge, and then you come back 6 months later and you're very confident they're doing it. So it might change from they're doing this with assistance to they can do this on their own. And, that would show that there's some progression in those developmental milestones. I think
And
sort
then-
of that, I'm wondering whether they can do it or not. I think if you come back in 6 months, it's going to be, it's going to sort that out. And I think that's a strong reason why we need people to come in every 6 months and do that.
And as a parent, in 6 months, will we be able to see our own progression?
You'll be able to see your own responses. That's correct. So if we go back to here, view responses, you can see, at least in the 2 blocks of survey questions that I've already completed in this one, you'll see view responses. It'll show your previous responses and your current responses.
That's awesome.
I
Thank
think
you.
that's a good question, Amanda. And I think how the question is actually worded, it actually says on a typical day. So I perceive that as, is this something that's consistent? Can your kid do this consistently? Um, uh, um, but you're right, perception really matters when you're reading these questions. And have you read all the instructions to each one? It's a good point.
Mhm.
I have a question about the data overall and who it's shared with and how it's shared. I know that you said it's shared freely, and that is a huge goal of the foundations, is to make sure that all data is available to anyone that needs it, to move forward with research. Can you explain a little bit more about how it's shared?
Certainly. Yeah, if you're a researcher and you're wanting access to the data, what the foundation has is a registry advisory board that's made up of clinicians, researchers, and parents. And any request for data is viewed by that registry advisory board. The request for data has to be institutional review board approved, so it has to be IRB approved. Independently of our review board. They'll basically look at the request, look at the researcher, and make an assessment of whether this is a valid request or not. And if so, the data is sent in a de-identified manner to the researcher.
Thank you. Um, I have a couple more questions. So, do you have to upload any medical records in order to participate in this study?
You don't. Nothing's required if you want to participate. We do have some questions marked with red asterisks, and those are questions that we do require you to answer. They're not going to be questions on like medication or medical history or anything like that. They're really just basic demographic questions. We do ask that you upload your genetic report because we need to be able to link your genetic variant with the conditions that you report. There's an option to upload medical reports. If you want to, we certainly have the capabilities of taking those, but definitely not required to do. The genetic report, though, we do require it.
That makes sense because we want to make sure that we're the data is accurate for SCN2A. I also found it really interesting that the data now shows that most people that are participating in this study do not report epilepsy. When I first started this group, the Facebook group in 2012, 2013, I thought that SCN2A meant epilepsy. I had no idea that people could be diagnosed with SCN2A related disorders and not have epilepsy. And I've seen the trend change in the last couple of years where more people with loss of function, no epilepsy, are accessing genetic testing and getting diagnosed with SCN2A related disorders. Do you expect the data trends to continue to change as genetic testing becomes more accessible to people with less severe symptoms, like the gain of function families present with?
Yeah, I think as genetic testing becomes more common, you're going to see a much larger community come in. I think probably when you start this, you see the more affected groups of people, and then as time progresses, you realize what we thought was a very small community is actually really a very large community. And I think that's really the importance of studies like this, is that it provides insight, and it says it's maybe we need to be thinking broader and bigger, and we can help a whole lot more people. And I think it's also important because the FDA and pharma are really thinking seizures when they think treatment of these conditions. And certainly there are subtypes that is a really good clinical endpoint, and that's something that we need to be thinking about. But as this data shows and some other data shows, there's a whole lot of people out there that seizures are not on their mind. It's communication, it's motor skills, and that those are really good avenues that pharma companies can say, well, maybe we're not looking at seizures, maybe we're looking at improving some of these other quality of life indicators.
That's so important. I think that is a great note to end the recording on. Thank you so much, Brad, for your time today to explain Dragonfly to our community. And if you have any questions, you can always email us, or there is an email for Dragonfly directly. We'll post all of that in the link when we post the recording. Thank you.